It was a typical Thursday evening when I first sensed something was off. The air in our home felt heavy, a stark contrast to the laughter and warmth that usually filled our living room. My wife, Sarah, had been acting strangely for weeks. Her laughter seemed forced, her phone was glued to her hand, and she had taken to spending late nights working on her podcast. I had always supported her passion for podcasting, but something about the way she spoke about her collaborations made my stomach churn. I brushed it off at first, attributing my unease to the stress of everyday life. But as the days turned into weeks, the signs became impossible to ignore. I started noticing the little things. The way her eyes lit up when her phone buzzed, the secretive smile she wore when she thought I wasn't looking. I convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I was reading too much into innocent moments. But one fateful night, everything changed. I returned home early from work, eager to surprise her with her favorite takeout. As I entered our dimly lit living room, I heard her voice echoing from the bedroom. It was a sultry tone, filled with playful banter. I paused, heart racing, as I recognized the voice on the other end of the line, none other than Jake Thompson, the famous podcaster whose show had taken the internet by storm. I stood frozen, the takeout bag slipping from my hands and crashing to the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silence. I leaned against the wall, straining to hear every word. My heart sank as I listened to her flirt with him. The laughter that once felt like music to my ears now twisted into a cruel symphony of betrayal. Every sweet nothing she whispered was a dagger, twisting deeper into my gut. It was in that moment I felt my world shatter. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I was not just a husband, I was a fool. I stumbled back outside, my mind racing with confusion and anger. I needed to breathe, to think. How could she do this to me? How could she betray the vows we had made, the life we had built together? My heart screamed for answers, but all I felt was the cold grip of betrayal. I wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation, but a part of me felt paralyzed. I was terrified of what I might find if I stepped into that room. Instead, I found myself packing the driveway, replaying every moment we had shared. The laughter, the late-night talks, the dreams we had spun together. Each memory now felt tainted, marred by the knowledge that she had been giving her heart to someone else. I felt like a stranger in my own life, a man whose trust had been shattered without warning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our home, I knew I had to make a choice. I could confront her and hope for some semblance of an explanation, or I could take a different path, one that would not only expose her betrayal but also serve as a means of reclaiming my power. The anger brewing inside me began to morph into a plan. I had been wronged, and I would make sure the world knew the truth about Sarah and her famous lover. The thought of revenge ignited a fire within me. I imagined every listener of Jake's podcast hearing about the real Sarah, the woman who had betrayed her husband for fame and attention. I could become the architect of my own justice. It was a dark thought, but in that moment it felt exhilarating. The evening air was thick with tension as I paced back and forth, my mind racing with possibilities. I had just stumbled upon the truth about my wife, Sarah, and it felt like a bitter poison coursing through my veins. I could confront her, and perhaps she would offer some half-hearted apology, a feeble attempt to justify her betrayal. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't be enough. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the pain she had inflicted upon me. No, I needed something more, something that would ensure she couldn't just brush this under the rug. The idea of exposing her affair began to take root in my mind. I envisioned the headlines, the gossip columns buzzing with the scandal of a beloved podcaster caught in a web of infidelity. The thought sent a shiver of excitement through me, a sense of power that I hadn't felt in weeks. I had been the victim, but now I could be the one pulling the strings. I sat down at my desk, the glow of the computer screen illuminating my face as I began to research. I had no experience with gossip outlets, but the internet was a treasure trove of information. I typed in Jake Thompson's name, and a slew of articles, podcasts, and social media accounts filled the screen. He was a rising star, adored by thousands for his charm and quick wit. But beneath that polished exterior lay a man who had willingly participated in the destruction of my marriage. As I scrolled through the articles, I felt a surge of anger. How dare he? How dare he take my wife from me? I knew I had to gather evidence, something concrete that would make the story undeniable. I started taking notes, outlining the timeline of Sarah's late nights, the strange phone calls, the flirtatious messages I had caught glimpses of before. I recalled the moments when she had come home smelling of cologne that wasn't mine, the way her eyes sparkled with a secret she thought I wouldn't discover. I felt a mixture of dread and exhilaration as I crafted my narrative. I could paint Sarah as the villain, the woman who had betrayed her husband for the allure of fame and attention. And Jake, he would be the charming snake that had slithered into our lives, whispering sweet lies into her ear. I wanted the world to see them for who they truly were, not the polished personas they presented to the public. But as I drafted my message to the gossip outlets, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was this really the path I wanted to take? I could destroy her life with a few clicks, but what would that mean for me? Would I feel vindicated, or would I just be left with the emptiness of revenge? I remembered the love we had shared, the dreams we had built together. Could I really burn it all to the ground? Yet, as I sat there, the pain of betrayal surged to the forefront of my mind. I recalled her laughter on the phone, the way she had whispered Jake's name with a fondness that should have been reserved for me. I felt the anger flare again, drowning out the doubts. I was tired of being the victim. I wanted to take control of my narrative, to flip the script on the story that had become my life. I took a deep breath and began typing, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I composed a message detailing the affair, the emotional betrayal, and the evidence I had gathered. I included snippets of conversations I had overheard, moments that would paint Sarah in a light she could never escape from. I wanted to make it clear that I wasn't just an angry husband. I was a man wronged, and I would not let her get away with this. With each word I felt a release, a catharsis that had been missing since I discovered her betrayal. I sent my message to every gossip outlet I could find, my heart racing with anticipation. I was unleashing a storm upon them, and I couldn't help but feel a thrill at the thought of it, but beneath that thrill lay a quiet fear. What if this backfired? What if I lost everything in the process? The thought lingered in my mind, but I pushed it aside. I was committed now. I had made my choice, and there was no turning back. This was my way of reclaiming my power, of ensuring that Sarah and Jake would be exposed for the truth of their actions. As I leaned back in my chair, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The pieces were in motion, and soon the world would know the truth. The days that followed my decision were a blur of anticipation and anxiety. I had sent my exposé to every gossip outlet I could find, and now I was left waiting, my heart racing with the fear of the unknown. I spent hours refreshing my email, hopping for a response, a sign that my plan was gaining traction. Each notification sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, but more often than not, it was just a spam email or a social media update that had nothing to do with my life. I knew I needed to gather more evidence to strengthen my case. I had already gathered snippets from her conversations, but I wanted something more concrete, something that would leave no room for doubt. I found myself becoming increasingly obsessed, diving into the depths of social media to piece together their interactions. I scoured through Sarah's Instagram, searching for any clues, any signs of her infidelity. I was relentless, fueled by a mix of hurt and fury. One evening I stumbled upon a series of posts that made my blood run cold. Sarah had been tagged in a photo with Jake at a local coffee shop, their bodies leaning into each other, smiles plastered across their faces. The caption read, "Great chats with amazing people. Blessed." I felt my stomach churn as I realized that this wasn't just a casual meeting. It was a rendezvous, a moment stolen away from our life together. I took a screenshot, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the evidence I needed. Next, I turned to the podcast itself. I listened to episode after episode, searching for any mention of Sarah, any hint that their affair had crept into his work. I was listening to a world that felt foreign to me, a world where my wife was no longer just my partner, but a muse for a man who had taken her from me. I found myself getting lost in the episodes, caught up in the charm of Jake's voice, but it only fueled my anger. Every laugh, every shared story felt like a betrayal. I began to compile a dossier, a collection of evidence that would expose them both. I organized the screenshots of their messages, the photos and snippets from the podcast into a single document. It was methodical, almost clinical, as I prepared to send it out to the media. I wanted to ensure that when the story broke, there would be no way for them to wriggle out of it. As I worked on my dossier, I started reaching out to specific gossip outlets, those known for breaking scandals. I crafted personalized messages, highlighting the juicy details of the affair, painting a picture of a love triangle that would captivate their readers. I knew the media thrived on drama, and I was ready to deliver it to them on a silver platter. Each message I sent was accompanied by a sense of power, a feeling of taking control of the narrative that had spiraled out of my hands. I could almost hear the clicks of keyboards as reporters began to take notice, their interest piqued by my revelations. I felt like a puppet master, pulling the strings, orchestrating the downfall of the two people who had betrayed me. But amidst the thrill of execution, I felt a gnawing doubt creeping in. What if Sarah found out what I was doing? Would she confront me? Would she try to spin the narrative in her favor? The thought sent a chill down my spine, but I quickly shoved it aside. I had to stay focused. This was about justice, about making sure that the world knew the truth of what had happened behind closed doors. As I sent out the final messages, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I was on the brink of something monumental, something that could change everything. I could feel the anticipation building, a storm brewing on the horizon. I was ready to witness the fallout, to see the consequences of my actions unfold. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of my decisions pressing down on me. I had taken a step into darkness, and while a part of me reveled in the power I had seized, another part trembled at the thought of the chaos that was about to ensue. Would I feel vindicated once the truth was out, or would I be left with a void that could never be filled? I closed my eyes, trying to silence my racing thoughts, but sleep eluded me. I was about to unleash a storm upon Sarah and Jake, and I could only hope that it would bring me the closure I so desperately sought. The next morning, I would wake up to a world that would never be the same again. The morning light spilled through the curtains, casting a golden hue across the room, yet I felt an ominous weight hanging in the air. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone, the anticipation of what was to come almost unbearable. Had the gossip outlets picked up my story? Had my life as I knew it begun to unravel? As I scrolled through my notifications, a wave of anxiety washed over me. There it was, a headline that made my stomach drop. Famous podcaster caught in scandalous affair with local wife. The article was everything I had hoped for and more, detailing the affair with a sensational flair that made my heart race. I felt a mixture of vindication and dread. The truth was out, but at what cost? I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction as I read through the article. The piece included quotes from my messages, snippets from the podcast, and even the incriminating photo of Sarah and Jake. It painted a vivid picture of betrayal, and I imagined Sarah's face as she read those words for the first time. I could almost hear her gasp, the shock reverberating through our home. But as the initial thrill faded, reality set in. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends and family, each one echoing the same sentiment: disbelief, shock, and sympathy. I felt the walls closing in around me. This wasn't just a story, it was my life, splashed across the internet for everyone to dissect. My heart sank as I realized the ramifications of my actions. I had exposed not only Sarah but also myself. Moments later, my phone rang. It was Sarah. I hesitated for a brief second before answering. Her voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. "What have you done?" she demanded, the hurt palpable in her tone. I could hear the tremor in her voice, the fear that I had unleashed a storm she couldn't control. "What have I done?" I echoed, my anger flaring. "You're the one who betrayed me, Sarah. You brought this on yourself." The words spilled out before I could stop them, fueled by a mixture of rage and hurt. I could hear her struggling to catch her breath on the other end, and for a moment I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the desire to make her understand the depth of my pain. "You didn't have to do this. We could have talked," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I never meant for it to go this far." The words felt like daggers, each one striking at the remnants of our relationship. I wanted to scream, to tell her that it was too late for apologies, that she had made her choice. "Talk," I scoffed. "You think talking would have changed anything? You chose him over me. You chose deception over honesty." The anger in my voice was palpable, and I could hear the silence on the other end as she processed my words. "I can explain," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was confused. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "Confused?" I spat. "You weren't confused when you were laughing with him, flirting with him. You weren't confused when you chose to lie to me every single day." The conversation spiraled into a chaotic exchange of accusations and half-hearted justifications. I could feel the weight of our shared history crashing down on us, the love we once had now buried under layers of betrayal and resentment. After what felt like an eternity, I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. I had exposed her, yes, but the fallout was more devastating than I had anticipated. My phone buzzed again, this time with a barrage of messages from friends and acquaintances. Some expressed their support, while others were quick to condemn my actions. The judgment was swift and unforgiving, and I felt the weight of their scrutiny. As the hours passed, the story gained traction. Social media exploded with reactions, and I could see the hashtags trending. "Sarah the Cheater," "Podcast Scandal." I was both horrified and mesmerized by the chaos I had unleashed. News outlets were calling for statements, and I could only imagine Sarah's frantic attempts to manage the damage. But it wasn't just her life that was crumbling. Mine was too. I felt the weight of shame creeping in. The realization that I had publicly aired our dirty laundry. My name was now linked to a scandal, and I was left to grapple with the consequences of my actions. I had sought revenge, but it felt hollow as I watched the world react to the fallout. As the day wore on, I received a call from a close friend, someone I had confided in about my suspicions before the affair was exposed. "Dude, are you okay?" he asked, concern lacing his tone. "This is all over the place. You know this could ruin both of you, right?" I felt a wave of anger rise within me. She ruined everything, I just made sure people knew the truth. "But at what cost?" he pressed. "You're not just hurting her, you're hurting yourself too. Have you thought about what this means for your future?" His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't thought about the long-term consequences of my actions, the way they might ripple through my life. I had been so consumed by my anger that I hadn't paused to consider the fallout. As I hung up, I felt a profound sense of loss. I had wanted to reclaim my power, but instead, I had set off a chain reaction that threatened to consume us both. I had exposed Sarah's betrayal, but I had also exposed my own vulnerability, my own pain. The chaos was just beginning, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had unleashed a monster that would leave nothing but destruction in its wake. The fallout from the scandal continued to ripple through my life like a tidal wave, and I found myself drowning in a sea of regret. Days turned into weeks, and the initial thrill of revenge had long since faded, leaving behind a bitter aftertaste. I had made my mark on the world, but at what cost? As I sat alone in our once happy home, the silence was deafening, echoing the emptiness that now filled my heart. I had thought that exposing Sarah would bring me some sense of closure, a feeling that justice had been served. Instead, I felt a profound sense of loss. The laughter we once shared, the dreams we had built together, all of it now lay in ruins. I was haunted by memories of the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted. I couldn't shake the image of her face when she realized the extent of what I had done, the shock and hurt etched into her features. It was a look I had never wanted to see, and yet I had conjured it into being. As I reflected on my choices, I felt a gnawing guilt creeping in. I had sought revenge, but I hadn't considered the consequences for myself. Friends had distanced themselves, unsure of how to react to the scandal that had consumed our lives. The whispers followed me wherever I went, a constant reminder of my decision to expose Sarah. I was no longer just a husband. I was the man who had taken to the internet to air his dirty laundry, and the weight of that label pressed heavily on my shoulders. I found myself scrolling through social media, watching the world react to the fallout. Some rallied behind me, praising my bravery for exposing the truth, while others condemned my actions as petty and vindictive. I felt like a pariah, caught in a web of judgment that left me feeling more isolated than ever. I had wanted to take control of my narrative, but now I felt like a character in a story that was spiraling out of my control. In the quiet moments, I replayed the conversations I had with Sarah before the affair came to light. I remembered her laughter, the way she would curl up beside me on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder. I had loved her fiercely, and the thought of that love being reduced to a scandal was too painful to bear. I had wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, but I had underestimated the depth of my own feelings. One evening, as I sat in the dim light of the living room, I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah's number. I hesitated, my heart racing as the line rang. I didn't know what I would say, but a part of me felt compelled to reach out. When she answered, her voice was cautious, almost guarded. "What do you want?" she asked, the hurt still palpable in her tone. "I wanted to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside me. "About what?" "There's nothing left to say," she replied, a hint of bitterness lacing her words. "Maybe there is," I pressed. I didn't want it to end like this. I thought exposing the truth would help, but all it did was destroy us. Silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. I could hear her breathing, a sign that she was processing my words. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to hurt you?" she said, her voice trembling. "I was confused and I made a terrible mistake, but you didn't have to drag me through the mud." "I know," I replied, my heart heavy. "I just wanted you to feel the pain I felt, but I didn't think about what it would mean for us, for our lives." "I can't believe you did this," she said, her voice breaking. "You've made it impossible for us to go back. You've turned our lives into a spectacle." The truth in her words hit me hard, and I felt the weight of regret settle in my chest. I had wanted to reclaim my power, but instead, I had surrendered it to the chaos that followed. I had exposed her, yes, but I had also exposed my own vulnerability, my own pain. "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "I thought I could make it right, but I only made it worse." "Right for whom?" she asked, her voice laced with anger. "You wanted revenge, and now you're left with nothing but guilt. I don't know if I can forgive you for this." "I don't expect forgiveness," I admitted. "I just wanted you to know that I regret what I did. I thought it would give me closure, but it only deepened the hurt." We ended the call, and I sat in the silence that followed, the weight of our conversation settling over me. I had sought revenge, but I had lost so much more in the process. The love I had for Sarah wasn't extinguished. It had morphed into something darker, tinged with regret and sorrow. I had wanted to expose her betrayal, yet I had only succeeded in exposing the fragility of my own heart. As the days turned into weeks, I began to realize that revenge had not brought me the closure I sought. Instead, it had left me with a chasm of pain, and I knew I had to find a way to heal. I didn't know what the future held, but I understood that I had to confront my own feelings and come to terms with the choices I had made. I had embarked on a path of destruction, and now it was time to rebuild, not just my life, but my sense of self. I had to learn to forgive, not just Sarah, but myself as well. The journey ahead would not be easy, but I was determined to find a way to move forward, to reclaim my life from the ashes of betrayal. The days turned into weeks, and the noise of the scandal began to fade, replaced by the quiet hum of reality. I found myself in a strange place, a world where I had exposed my wife's betrayal, yet was still grappling with the consequences of my own actions. The media frenzy had died down, but the echoes of judgment lingered, a constant reminder of the chaos I had unleashed. I was left to pick up the pieces of my life, with the weight of my choices hanging heavily on my shoulders. As I navigated this new normal, I began to reflect on the lessons I had learned through this painful ordeal. Revenge had felt like a sweet reprieve, a way to reclaim my power in the face of betrayal. But as the initial thrill faded, I realized that the path I had chosen had only deepened my pain. I had wanted to expose Sarah and Jake, but in doing so, I had exposed my own vulnerability and heartache. I spent time journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the page as a way to process what had happened. I wrote about my anger, my regret, and the love I still felt for Sarah despite everything. It was a cathartic release, a way to confront the turmoil within me. I began to understand that healing wouldn't come from seeking revenge or inflicting pain on others, but rather from confronting my own emotions and learning to forgive. One afternoon, I found myself sitting at a cafe, the sun streaming through the windows. I watched couples laugh and share intimate moments, and a pang of longing washed over me. I missed the connection I had with Sarah, the laughter, the shared dreams, the simple joy of being together. I realized that while she had betrayed me, I had also lost sight of the love we had built. In that moment, I made a decision. I would reach out to her again, not to reopen old wounds, but to find a way to communicate honestly. I wanted to understand her side of the story, to hear her truth, and perhaps to share mine as well. It was time to confront the past and find a way to move forward, whether together or apart. I drafted a message to Sarah, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as I searched for the right words. "I'd like to talk," I wrote. "Not about the affair, but about us. I think we owe it to ourselves to share our truths and see if there's any way to heal from this." I hesitated before hitting send, the weight of my decision heavy in my chest, but I knew that this was the only way I could find closure. To my surprise, she responded quickly. "I'd like that," she wrote. "It's time we face the truth together." The days that followed were filled with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. I was nervous about what our conversation would hold, but I was also hopeful. I wanted to understand how we had arrived at this point and whether there was a path forward for us. When the day finally arrived for us to meet, I felt a mix of trepidation and resolve. We chose a quiet park, a place that had once been filled with laughter and love. As we sat on a bench, the weight of our shared history hung between us. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw not just the woman who had betrayed me, but the woman I had loved deeply. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know we have a lot to unpack, but I want us to be honest with each other." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know I hurt you, and I can't express how sorry I am for my choices. I was lost and confused. I thought I was escaping something, but I only created more pain. I felt betrayed, and I wanted to hurt you back." I admitted, my heart heavy. "But in trying to expose you, I lost sight of what really mattered. We had something special, and I let my anger destroy it." We talked for hours, sharing our feelings, our fears, and our regrets. It was painful, but it was also liberating. I realized that while our relationship had been shattered, the love we had shared was still there, albeit buried beneath layers of hurt. By the end of our conversation, we had both shed tears, but we had also found a glimmer of hope. We agreed that rebuilding would take time, and it wouldn't be easy. We were willing to try. We spoke of therapy, of honesty, and of the commitment to rediscovering the love that had initially brought us together. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I had faced the truth, both about Sarah and about myself. I had sought revenge, but in the end, what I truly wanted was understanding, healing, and perhaps even forgiveness. Life would be different moving forward, but I was ready to embrace the journey ahead. I had learned that revenge was a double-edged sword, but love, when nurtured, had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. In the end, I had not just exposed the truth, I had uncovered the potential for a new beginning. And with that realization, I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next.